Today we're going to look at one of the most difficult topics to get right when you're setting up AutoCAD Plant and Plant 3D. A lot of times people can come in and we can figure out how to configure our tagging for our line segments so that we can use something like this to fill in our line numbers. And where it starts to get challenging though is when you start looking at the 3D model. One of those common scenarios to see is when we come in and we assign them, we'll see a line number tag set up like this. We go to new, and it looks something where they've put in, the users have put in the 4-inch, the spec, the service, and the line number. And we'll look at why that can create problems. And we'll also show how to get your line number coming out correctly in your plans. So these are all common tag formats that we see, all created from this line number tag annotation. We can show how to customize that so it matches what you need. And we'll show how to get what we need on the ISO. So a lot of times people see this 1001 size and spec come out, and that's not exactly what they need. So there's three really hard areas: your models, your plans and sections, and then your ISOs that we need to kind of walk through some steps for configuring your line number tags and your annotations. Let's first review the idea of a pipeline group. We come in here, take a look. We have a line running from TK001 to P001. Now let's take a look at the number of line segments we have. So here we have, I click on this line segment. It runs from the tank to this reducer. If I pull up my properties palette, I can see my to and from information shows that correctly. And then if I select the segment over here, I have some more to and from information. And then there's a third segment for this drain. So all in all, I have 3 line segments, and most companies would want to see one line number value, this 1001, for all 3 of those segments. And so that's what we call a line group. So a line group can be defined as a group of piping components that start from one piece of equipment and then tie into another piece of equipment or a different pipeline. So we use this line group concept to basically relate in the P&ID side a bunch of line segments, a bunch of inline assets like valves and other items, and group them all together. And so that's what this line group does for us. So I have one line group. You can see it if you select it. You can see everything is highlighted. That's all in one group. Let's take a look at project setup and see how that is set up for us regarding our line segment tags. And then also we'll look at our pipeline group tags. So first, let's look at our pipeline segment tags. And these are really easy to customize. And most of the time, people can get them set up correctly first. So I'll go select. So in my tree, in my navigation, I went to P&ID drawing settings, class definitions, lines, and then selected pipeline segments. I'm going to go to tag format here at the bottom left of my panel. And you can see these options. And we have some tricks that we can show you. This is something we usually do in our advanced class, where you can add and hide your installation and heat tracing if you don't have any, and then also so you don't have dashes or dots or question marks at the end. So we can definitely set that up for you. But out of the box, we have a size, spec, service, and line number. And so that's something people customize really easily. And a lot of times we'll see this, then switch the order. So to switch the order, create a new tag format with a different order, I would come up here and edit this one. And let's say we want to put the service first and the spec last. It's pretty common. So this one, I'm not changing the number of items. I'm just going to change the order. So I'm going to come in here, choose my class button, which is going to let me pick a class property. And so I'll come over here, and this time I don't want to use my target object. So I'm going to switch over to the pipeline group because I wanted to pull my service from my pipeline group. The target object is whatever class you've inserted in the model, like a primary line segment or a secondary line segment. That class has to have that same property. So it'd be looking for the service on a secondary line segment when it needs to look for it at the pipeline group. So I'll come uncheck target object, use pipeline group, and then choose service here. And we'll do the same thing for our line number. Pick up our class property, pipeline group, line number, and then we're going to switch back to our spec because each line could have a different spec. And so here we'll use the target object property and choose the spec. And that's a really easy way to just create a new line segment tag in a different format. And so we'll go ahead and work with this throughout the rest of this little discussion. and show how to get size, service line number, and spec into your project. So the last part, which I almost always forget, is to switch our tag format name. And you can see that here we can expand our default value. So we just want to switch from whatever the default was to our new one. And then we can hit apply or OK. In this case, I'll hit apply, and let's keep talking a little bit before we go back and look and see how that changes things for us. Next, we'll look at our pipeline group. So we already reviewed the concept of a line group and how it's arranged, but there's a couple other ways that we see people use pipeline tag formats, pipeline group tag formats pretty regularly. So let's start with the line number, and we're going to do line number service dash line number. So this is pretty common. Most of the time, I think like around 50 to 60% of our users would just look for a unique number anywhere in the project. But then there's some cases and some clients where it's the service combination of service and line number that is unique. So for example, you could have P-1001, but you could also have AV-1001. And we'll look at that example in the 3D model and show you what the difference is and where that comes in. But in some cases, we do need to include more than one property to identify when a group of piping components is unique. And so this is just showing how to set that up for like our service and line number. I'll go ahead and give it a new format name. I'll bump my property list. So I'll set my pipeline group current, uncheck use target up to property, and we're going to start with the service. Then we're going to come down and choose our pump icon again. And we're still using the pipeline group class. And this time we'll choose a line number property. And there's another common one, and this one is the area. So we don't have an area property, so I'll go ahead and add an area property to my line group. Notice that the pipeline group is equivalent at the same level as the engineering item. So if you want an area property, you need to add it to both the engineering items and the pipeline group class. So I'll go ahead and add that here. Then we'll do a new tag format with area, service, line number. And we're going to do 3 subparts. And we'll start with the area. Then we'll go to the service. And then we'll go to the line number. And like I said, these are probably the 3 most common scenarios. But on the P&ID side, it's not that big of an impact. You just switch whichever one you want current, and then that will apply for how you group items. Where it does come into play is the pipe in the 3D model side. So on the P&ID side, we have the line segment to class, which lets us set those properties, but then it gets a little more complex on the 3D side. So let's look at that and switch over there and see how that impacts us on the 3D side. So taking a look real quick at my pipe in my 3D model, I've made some notes in text here. So you can see my line number tag for this pipe is 4-inch dash CS150-P-1000. And because of the way I've set up my line number, I can also have a 6-inch CS150-P-1000. Now, obviously, if these pipes are like right connected, it's pretty easy to find that and catch that. But when you start running into people in multiple models, different pipers right on the same line, it raises your chance that you're going to have people starting lines at different sizes, and it increases the chance that you have duplicate line numbering issues all over your model. And so where you would see that is in our data manager. I set up a custom view that helps us see this information. So we can go to project custom views, and here I can see all my line groups. And so notice here my tag format, I have 2 1001s. And so that's going to affect my ISOs. That's going to affect the quality of my reports. Different components could be in different spots. You might have, maybe someone started this at a control station. They might have accidentally created the tag under the control station size. When we route up a pump, usually we're going to increase right off the pump, but when we start the line, we're going to route a smaller size. So we might have started at the pump at 2 inches and gone to 3 inches right away, but then the rest of the line is called 2 inches. And so these types of issues will start appearing when you look at your tag format. You'll see size, spec, and then what you're looking for, though, is based on the tag selection that you've identified for your line group. what you really want to have is either a single number for the number tag, or if you're using a combination of service and number, you would want to see just your service option. So there's P-1002 and AB1002. Or if you're using the area-service-number, then you would see the area service number included in there. And so those combinations are going to be what's unique, and then it's also going to help your pipers make sure that they're getting all the components underneath the correct line number for your reporting purposes. And so what that looks like is, here are some examples of the good data. So this is what we don't want. We don't want to see size. We don't want to see spec information, but we do want to see a unique number, or a unique combination of service and number, or a unique combination of area, service, and line number. And so these are all the options we get in our model. That does mean your routing could be impacted. So for example, when I'm going through and creating a new line, I'm going to have to come back and set my line number. And when I go to assign it, it's going to look like it's missing stuff because I'm going to put in a unique number. So 1023. And then if I go down and look at my process line, so here at the top we have part properties under general. And notice we have our lightning bolts, which mean that those properties are acquired. And then we have specific properties like service and some other properties under the process line. So if you're using service and number, then you could come in here and choose your service. You can change it here from the properties palette. But a lot of times we want more information put in, and that's going to affect how it comes out on ISO. So a lot of times we need to go in and get our nominal size and nominal spec filled out. Sometimes we need to fill in more information like our installation type or thickness. And to do that, after you've modeled the line, or you've gotten some part of the piping in the model with a line number, then you would come back to your data manager, and you could set up a view like this. Let's see, drawing custom views, and now I can find my line that I want to add some information about, and I can set a nominal spec. And you might want to set your insulation thickness over here. And you might need to set more information about your insulation type and your tracing type. And all that's doable from your data manager. So a lot of information like this we'll have when we set up advanced configurations. We can go through our admin process. We show how to set up configurations like this to where all this information gets pushed to your ISO. And then you can get whatever you need to out. And there's also some things you can do to make it easier to update. So you could create reports and import that data back into your 3D model. So that's what the model picture looks like. Let's go ahead and take a look at our plans and sections, how we're going to get those labels to come out like we want. So on our piping plan, on our orthographic drawing, we have already labels on this piping. My favorite method is select, right click, and go to ortho annotate, and then you can pick the annotation you want to use. We use the line number callout. So if I come over here to this one and do full line number callout, it's going to look a little bit different than just using the pipeline tag callout, because my pipeline tag had absolutely everything in it, which is what we don't want at this stage. So let's go ahead and take a look and see what we can do to get the line style that we want, which would be something like the size. We want the size, the service, the line number, and then the spec. And so we'll see how to configure that. So our annotations on our 3D model come from Plant 3D drawing settings, class definitions, piping and equipment, and pipe run component. Coming down here, we have our full line number callout, and then we have also just our line number callout, which just pulls the line number value. So we're going to start with our full line number callout, and we're going to change that so we get the order that we want, regardless of what gets put in the model. And so to do that, we'll select the one that we want to use as a template, then come over here and click Add Annotation. And then I can come over here and let's just do this. Let's call it size, service, line number, spec. And we're going to go on the text layer and we're going to keep these values. And I'll go to Edit Block. And now we're going to tell the program what we want it to pull out when we're labeling things. And we can do that by coming over here, and somewhere on your screen there will be this Assign Format button. And this works very much like our tag dialog. So in this case, we're going to bump up our property count. We're going to come over to a class button, And we want to make sure we pull the pipeline group property or the P3D line group. So we have to uncheck use target object property. We want service to be the second property. We're going to pull in the line number from our P3D line group class. And on the 3D side, it's just called number, not line number. And then last of all, we're going to put in the spec of whatever the component is that we have selected. So we can come down here and just choose spec, and we're going to have target object property selected, so it doesn't matter if it's a pipe or anything else. As long as it has a spec property, it'll use that. And so there's a really quick, it's literally just a few seconds to create your annotation for labeling on the 3D side. So we'll save that, and let's demonstrate what that looks like when we insert that in the plan drawing. So let me go ahead and hit OK. We're back in our plan, so I can come over here and I can do ortho annotate, and there's our size, service line number, spec, and it's just pulling the property values. It doesn't matter what my tag was. It's completely independent, but I'm able to label them in the format that I want. So we should make the drawing output a consideration for how we're labeling our models or how we're tagging items in our model. So that's the plan. We need to jump over and let's take a look at the ISOs. And so here the problem we're going to try and fix on the ISOs is this order of our items displayed along the pipeline. And so this is a little bit more complicated, which just means it's more fun, right? We get to learn about a tool that I love called Plant Define Calc Properties. And this is one of those I stumbled across by just looking at the list of commands inside of Plant 3D one day. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create a property on our pipe P3D line group class that we can export to our isometric. Now there's a couple things. We have to separate what I'm going to call the physical properties, like the item size or spec, from the 3D line group properties, because we can't mix and match those. So we can display all of the physical properties, and then we can display the line group properties, or we can display the line group properties first and display the physical properties second. Out of the box, it displays the physical properties second. We're going to switch that around and use the size from the physical properties, and then we're going to use the line group properties. And so we're going to start that. I'm going to call this ISO line number, and this is going to be a string property. And we're going to come down and do functions. And so we're going to combine our service, our line number, and our spec into a nominal spec into a single property. And you can do this without combining them, but it's just more work. So my preference is for flexibility, because if you have various clients, you don't necessarily know what order you're going to use. For flexibility, I like to use one property and switch them on the fly if I need to in a specific project. So we're going to start with service, and we're going to use, and these are called pipes. And so I'll refer to those as pipes, the vertical bars. And what is unique about this is we have to use a single quote. So make sure you do not have a double quote. That is the most common mistake. Single quote, and then a dash, and then another single quote. And then we'll do another bar, which is going to say, so we're going to join service with a dash, and then we're going to add our number property. Then we're going to join that with another dash, and then put in our double bar, and then we're going to have the nominal spec at the very end. And after we set that up, we're going to hit apply. So we have service dash number dash nominal spec, and that'll be in our ISO line number property. And what the program is going to do for us, it's going to create a single property in a project setup, and it's going to stick that at the very end. And so here we can see, here's our ISO line number property that we're going to use to put in our ISOs. Now notice, I've changed my tag format several times, so as you select and bring up the design tag, it's going to try and recalculate your tag based on the latest value if you select something. So that's what these question marks are coming in for, because I've changed the tag format several times. So here's what's going to come out on our ISO. Before we can customize the ISO style, we need to get our ISO line number property into our title block. And one of the tricky things is if you just edit the ATR file, which is located in our ISO style, if we just edit this, then the program, when it's loading your settings, it could rewrite that. So we want to make sure that that doesn't get lost. So the easiest way I've found to do that is to come down to isometric drawing settings, title block and display, make sure you're on the right ISO style, and then click Set Up Title Block. And we're going to go to Title Block Attributes. And one of my favorite little tricks is to, let's choose our line group properties, and we're going to pull in the ISO line number, which should be right there. And we're going to hit place, and I'm going to place it over here out of the border area, but we don't want this to display. So I'm going to go ahead and hit invisible on that attribute. So it will be there, but no one can see it, but the program knows it needs to write that value to the ISO ATR whenever we need, whenever we make changes to our ISO style. So I'm going to go ahead and save my changes to my title block. And don't forget your favorite command, Batman, or if you don't want to use that Batman, you can do @sync, but I just can't resist typing in Batman. So you can do that or @sync. And what you want to make sure you have happen is when you go to edit your attributes, you need to be able to see your ISO line number attribute there. Once that's done, we can return to project setup, save the changes. So let's see what this did for us in the ISO ATR. So what we have here is a mapping of attributes 1 through 9. And you can see we have ISO line number here, P3D line group ISO line number. And we also have BOM attributes here. So this is what's going to help us build a link between our title block setup and our attribute values that we want to fill in with properties from our project setup. And to see where that really comes into play, let's look at our ISO config XML. So that's loaded up here. And where that shows up is our title block. So here's our title block name and our attributes. And notice that we have a mapping, attribute 9, ISO line number. And so we can use this here. And what we're going to do now is we're going to come down to our themes, default theme, annotations. I'm going to go down to our annotation themes and find our line number label. But we need to talk about these 3 properties: line format, format, and component format. Diving in a little bit deep, but stay with me. Our component fields match our component format. So what it's saying here is it's saying our component format is going to look like the first item, and this ISO config XML, the first item, 0, is going to have a dash, and then we're going to have the second item, which would be 1. So they're just saying give us our size, and then dash, and then our spec. And then our line format uses the line fields. And so this is the pipeline reference. Whatever we use for our P3 line group tag, that's what's going to come in our line format. So our line format is just going to use this. But what we're going to do here is we're going to switch our pipeline reference with our line format. And so I'm going to come in here, and it was attribute 9. So I'm going to save that, and then that should give us pretty close to what we need. But if we take a look back real quick, and if we remember what our ISO looked like, notice we have our pipeline reference, 1001, and then our size and spec came first. We want our size and spec on the other side, so we want this to come first, and then we want the rest of our ISO line number property to come after that. And so we're going to need to switch that order. And that comes into play for our format here under the main format. So I'm going to come in here and put 1 in the brackets and then -0. And that's saying put our component format in first and then put it in a line format. But we don't need our size and our piping spec. We just need our size. And so I'm going to take off the -1. So this should be our size here, and then dash our attribute 9, which is going to be our ISO line number. So that's a little complicated, but think about it as you play with it. You'll see how it works. And let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. So we run the production ISO on line 1001 and hit create, and let's let that think for a little bit. So my ISO is done. I'm going to come over here and open it up. And we take a look, and you can see I have size, service, number, spec. It's amazing. After we have properly set up our tagging across our P&IDs, models, and orthos, we should be able to do something like this and have our annotation placed. In our piping model, our tagging would look something like this. We have the line number tag. And also this would work with a P&ID line list palette. because we're using the single line number property in our line group tag for our pipeline groups and our P3D line groups. Our plans all have the size, service, number, and spec. And then on our isometrics, we're able to get the size, service, number, and spec property as well.